It is Friday, June 19th. This is the Christian Commute. I am your host, Seth Dunn, and you're riding home with me. Except I'm not going home, I'm going to my parents' house because that's where my kids are. And the explanation for why they are there is the same explanation as to why there's no show on Tuesday, or there was no show on Tuesday, because my wife is gone. My wife and my 3 older children went to church camp. My wife went to be a chaperone. So I did not go to work Tuesday because there would have been nobody home for the contractor. We were having some restoration work done at my house after like a water leak problem, and they were finally finishing, so I had to be there to let the painter in. And that's why there was no show on Tuesday. I worked at home. I only went to work one day this week, and that's today. So this is the day that there is a Christian Commute. Don't forget to support the Y Project, ycrosspoint.com, yrockbridge.com, ynorthpoint.org, yelevation.com. This weekend in Y Project news, Cross Point City Church is having its Act Like Men conference because it's around Father's Day, and they're having Josh Howerton and Matt Chandler come speak. David Pollock's going to be there too. Go Dogs. I promise this is true. This is how I recollect it. I was at a gas station in Athens, Georgia, filling up my tank because I went to the University of Georgia the same time David Pollock did. And I want to say I was off Millage Avenue. And I'm standing there filling up my tank at this gas station, and I look across the road, and a pickup truck comes by, and there's all these guys riding in the back. And I promise you, I saw David Pollock, or at least some guy who looks exactly like him, sitting in the back of that pickup truck, going down the road, like on the edge of the pickup truck. And I'm thinking, dude, you're gonna get injured. You're the best football player in this whole town. Why are you riding down Millage Avenue in the back of a pickup truck? Like sitting on the edge. Maybe it wasn't David Pollock, but I remember that to this day. I don't know if he has anything good to say at a Christian Men conference. Who knows? I do know you'd have to pay me to go hear Josh Howerton, who we talked about at length on the last show, and Matt Chandler. Matt Chandler, who said when they're hiring elders at his church, the Village Church, number one, they use a search firm to find elders, because apparently Paul could have just told Timothy, hey, hire a search firm. But they use a search firm to hire elders, and he said, if there is a black 7 and a white 8, and that's the candidates for elders, they take the black 7 because diversity. So if you want to go hear that woke guy tell you how to be a man, go to Cross Point's Men Conference. If you want to go hear Favor the Rich, Josh Howerton, who by the way was all up in wokeness when he was supporting Black Lives Matter, Josh Howerton, who let Beth Moore preach on his church on a Sunday. If you want to go hear that guy tell you how to be a man, go to Cross Point's Men's Conference. If you want to stand against garbage like that, support the Y Project, because crap like that is why the Y Project exists. Seeker-sensitive coffee bar goat churches in the purple haze, led by Pastor Electric Blue, inviting Pastor Electric Blue friends to tell the men of your town how to be a man and whatnot. What a shame. What a shame. Josh Howerton, I think, is speaking at something with, like, I want to say Mark Driscoll. It's just all they care about. All they care about is putting dollars in their pockets for the next conference fee. A bunch of unqualified people. Anyway, that's the Y Project update. Today's show title, I'm going to have to pick between some. It's either going to be Ogden History X Sauve and Swaggart, or something to do with Duck Dynasty. We're going to talk about those Ogden guys. But first, we're going to do the Bible chapter review. And in between, there will not be a question in the inbox because the inbox is empty. If you have a question about Christian theology and apologetics, you can write to sethdunn88@gmail.com. sethdunn88@gmail.com. Let's get back into Luke chapter 13, verses 15 through 17. Jesus has just healed a woman on the Sabbath. Not of a regular backache, but as some kind of demonic scoliosis caused by the devil. So we had a woman who was bent over, like hunched over for 18 years. Jesus is in the synagogue on the Sabbath day. He sees her and he heals her. And then the Sabbath officials take issue, like, no, if people want to be healed, they need to come tomorrow. Today's the Sabbath day. So they were upset, and Jesus rebukes them. And here's what goes on. But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the stall and lead him away to water him? And this woman, a daughter of Abraham she is, whom Satan has bound for 18 long years, should she not have been released from this bond on the Sabbath day?" As he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, and the entire crowd was rejoicing over all the glorious things done by him. So Jesus, as I mentioned last time, is pointing out to his critics that they view this woman as something lesser or less important than a farm animal. And we say farm animals now because nobody in my neighborhood, and I'm guessing nobody in your neighborhood, has a donkey or ox because we have cars. But Jesus makes the point that just because it's the Sabbath day, it doesn't mean they don't water their animals. I want to make a point to you. If you have an animal, you should give the animal water every day, or make sure the animal has water every day. But if you didn't give the animal water every day, probably wouldn't die. Like if you don't drink water one day, will you die? No, it'll take you about a week to die, I think, from not drinking water. And it's the same way for animals. So it's not life or death. I just want to point this out to you. It's not life or death to water your animal every day, but you do, because only an awful person wouldn't. So you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, right? Of course not. But you're still going to get your ox or its donkey out of its stall, that is where you keep it, so it doesn't wander off, and lead it down to the pond or the brook or the creek or the river and let it drink. I have 4 kittens in my basement right now, and our cat. So we had a girl cat, and the girl cat had kittens. Oh, this is about to be an accident. Hold on. That was bad timing. Sorry, I had to slow down. Somebody was trying to merge where there's an 18-wheeler, and somebody was going to get over. Anyway, disaster averted. My cat had kittens, and I'm trying to get rid of these things. I'm trying to give them away. And when I go down, the first thing every morning when I get to the basement door, because that's where I've got them, I'm going to go down to my office. They're all meowing at me. And I go down and I pick up their water dish, I fill it full of water, and they all go drink up that water. I do that before I get my work started. If I said, sorry, I don't like cats, leave me alone, I've got to get started, and maybe I'll give you water tomorrow, those cats wouldn't die. They'd just be pretty miserable. So this woman has been miserable for 18 years with this incredibly bad handicap caused by the devil. And Jesus heals her, and the people take an issue. Jesus is just way after him. He calls them hypocrites. In other words, they're phony, because they would tell people it's totally okay to feed your ox or water your ox on the Sabbath. No big deal. But they're going to turn around with this human being. Jesus calls her a daughter of Abraham. So not just a general human being, but somebody in the nation of Israel. And they're going to get mad at Jesus for healing her. And they're humiliated. Jesus humiliates them. I guess he's not considering their feelings. They're humiliated in front of the crowds. The entire crowd, though, in the synagogue, they're rejoicing over the glorious thing done by Jesus. That's what the critics should have been doing, the critics of Jesus. They should have been rejoicing at it, but instead, they were being hypocrites. Now let me turn around and criticize somebody for their church conference. Okay. Let's get to the show title, now that the Bible chapter review is over. There is a church in Ogden, Utah. It's called Refuge Church. It is one of these churches that it's Presbyterian, but it's not. So it's a Paedo-Baptist church. And they would say, we're a Calvinistic church. I don't know if they go by the Westminster. They would say they're Reformed if you went to their website, but they don't answer to a presbytery. It's a gas station church, okay, just founded by some dude. And that dude is Brian Sauve, okay? And there's a guy out there with him who's one of his elders, and that guy's name is Eric Kahn. And they are Twitter famous and around Reformed people. So they are operating on the same business model as Doug Wilson and Jeff Durbin and Joel Evan. Here's what people are starting to do. They're going to start their own gas station church. And then they're going to say, I'm a pastor, totally a pastor. Of course, there's no one that can stop them from being a pastor because this is America. And they generally avoid having ecclesiastical authority over them. And we talked about last week how that's not all, you don't have to have ecclesiastical authority over you because you should be a Baptist. But if you're a Presbyterian, it's part of the deal. But they'll set themselves up and they're not just going to have a church, they're going to have a podcast. And they're not just going to have a church and a podcast, they're going to have a publishing house. They're going to make a school. They're going to think of every little entrepreneurial business activity they can and include it in their ministry. This is totally a church. Okay? It's entrepreneurial. That's why I call these gas station guys. But a gas station church is just a church some guy makes. We've talked about that. But these guys are trying to make a Buc-ee's. It's got everything. And the model of this, of course, is Doug Wilson, who founded his own church, started his own CREC denomination, and then he's got New St. Andrews College. I think he's got a homeschool curriculum, that Trivium curriculum that they do. And he's got Canon Press. He's got a media arm. And Brian Sauve and Eric Kahn, they got music too, because Salve's a musician. And for whatever reason, these guys nowadays, they decide we're going to be Calvinists. And I think that's part of picking up disaffected people. So they had their conference last week. And they invited the usual suspects to speak at their conference. And people on Twitter and on social media started noticing and posting pictures. Guys, there's a Nazi here. I wish I could make this up, but I'm not. There was a sponsor of their conference who had a vendor booth set up, and he was selling Nazi literature. And then that guy got on the internet and says, I am a Nazi. He says he's a Nazi. Now, I don't know if you can have Nazis anymore, because doesn't a Nazi have to be a member of the National Socialist Party? Like there was a Nazi party in Germany and now they're gone. So I don't know if you can be a Nazi, but here's a guy who says he's a Nazi. A straight up Nazi. Not somebody who just likes to hang out with white people. He's a Nazi. Not somebody who just is suspicious of the media because it's owned by Jews. A Nazi. And let me just tell you something as a Southerner. Nazis are somebody I take particular offense with, especially neo-Nazis, because they'll put swastikas and Confederate flags together. And you come to where I'm from, well, hold on a minute. We beat the Nazis in World War II. America did. They were evil. They had the Holocaust and trying to take over Europe and the Third Reich. The Nazis were bad. Like, my granddad fought against the Nazis. But then you go back a few generations, my great-great-granddad or whoever fought against the Union as a part of the Confederacy. And you get these white supremacists who start taking Confederate imagery and mixing it with Nazi imagery, and like, nope, no, two different things. And the reason I bring that up is because there would be certain people who operate in conservative circles or Christian nationalist circles who would have sympathies towards the lost cause or the Old South, not because they're racist, but because they favor that way of life and that value system, you know, other than the racism and slavery. So I don't want that to get mixed up. I just want you to know, like, this guy is a Nazi, and he carried with him Nazi books because he thought the people at this conference are going to buy up my Nazi books, like speeches of Hitler and stuff like that. And they were at this conference sponsored by the people from Refuge Church. Okay. You should mark and avoid those guys. I wish it would go without saying. And their reaction was not like, oh no, there's a Nazi at our conference. We're so sorry this slipped through the tracks. We hereby repudiate the Nazi, and we are super apologetic. That's not what it was. They were like, oh yeah, it's hard to vet all these people. Some of this was historic literature. You know, sort of making excuses for it. And on the one hand, if they say they're sorry and they were wrong, the people, their critics, are just going to pile on them anyway. So they're basically trying to be strong and not apologize. But just whatever. They got Nazis there. They're bad. I wish that was evident to more people. But I sort of noticed a pattern. I noticed the pattern with Jeff Durbin and Joel Webbin and Doug Wilson and all these people trying to work this business model that's generally being a theonomic business model. But here's how it works. Because of all the wokeness in America, I mean, there was a minor league baseball team that had to cancel their baseball game this week because the players said, we're not wearing your pride jerseys. Like, we're not doing it. And they said, we're just going to cancel the baseball game. Like, the radical woke left has made far too many advances in society. I mean, they when Biden was in there, whoever was in charge while Joe Biden was having dementia, put rainbows on the White House, you know, for Pride, quote unquote, Pride Month. Just outright wickedness. Okay, you got gay marriage running wild like Hulkamania all over the United States. And you start seeing people, conservative white people, especially young white people, and they're going to start thinking, things are kind of turning against my culture. And not only that, at church, we have all this wokeness, like I talked about Matt Chandler, and all this Arminian-style, Phineas-style revivalism and wokeness. Oh, where do I go? And the theonomic people like Doug Wilson and Jeff Durbin, they say right here, we're Calvinists, and we're theonomists, and we're Christian nationalists, and we're going to take back the country. And basically, you get sort of different, more extreme degrees of no outright racism in those crowds. So I'll be the first one to admit I don't keep up with Brian Sauve or listen to his music or keep up with Eric Kahn and the bombastic stuff they say on Twitter. Like, I'm not the expert on all the things those guys have done wrong. There are experts on all the things those guys have done wrong. And, people like Eli McGowan and Blake Callens who just Twitter troll them. And those guys are probably more liberal than I am. So it's one of those things like, well, even Julie Royce is over the right target sometime. But there's guys who can tell you all what's wrong with them. And everything they've ever said that's racist or misogynistic. And they say these things and they always have plausible deniability. Like, we're not really racist. We're not really misogynistic. And then, like, you have a Nazi at your conference is like, there's really no plausible deniability anymore. Like, you should be marked and avoided, and probably anybody who still associates with you. And I own Pulpit and Pen. And for years, people would be like, well, Seth, we're not going to listen to your voice unless you disassociate with these Pulpit and Pen people. And I just want to say, forget you. I'm not turning on my friends. Okay? Loyalty is important. But at the same time, if my friends turned out to be Nazis, I would absolutely turn on them in a second. I'd be like, y'all are Nazis. You're not my friends anymore. But I fear people look too deeply into the arguments, writings, songs, and everything people like Brian Sauve make, and just miss that they're LARPing, they're live action role playing, they're characters, right? So y'all remember Duck Dynasty? Remember when Duck Dynasty was popular? I used to watch Duck Dynasty on A&E, and it was wholesome family fun, right? It was a wholesome family show. They prayed on every show that these are Christians and they're men's men, right? They go out hunting. They own a duck call company. They wear camo. They have big beards. And the show is about them running a business and hunting. And then their wives are doing wives stuff. And so this is great traditional family values. Too bad they're Church of Christ. We'll just forget for a minute that they're Church of Christ. But a lot of that was a work. Because you look at Willie Robertson and Jace Robertson and Jeff Robertson, and Phil Robertson, they got their big beards and stuff. Like, they're in character for a reality show. If you go back, say, 10 years, and you can find the old pictures of the guys who owned a duck commander, like Willie Robertson and Jace Robertson, they didn't have those big beards. They were clean shaven. They looked like everybody else. They didn't wear toboggans and camo every day. Like, they're in a character for their shtick. So when you look at the Joel Evans of the world and the Brian Sauves of the world and the Eric Kahns of the world, but specifically we're talking about Eric Kahn and Brian Sauve, they have the big beards and they have the slick hair, like they've got Dapper Dan in their hair, and they've got the beard oil. Brian Sauve has the curled mustache. He literally has a twirled mustache. Like, you remember the villains from black and white movies, and they twirl their mustaches and they tie women to railroad tracks? Brian Sauve looks like a villain who's out tying somebody to a railroad track. But that's his character. It's a gimmick like a wrestler would have. If you find an old picture of Brian Sauve, and I have, from when he got married, and I think he went to like a Calvary Chapel style Bible college, he's clean shaven. He's in a character. And their shtick is, we are men's men. And Eric Kahn used to be involved in the outdoor business, like hiking and hunting type thing, like a Duck Dynasty type thing. So they have their big beards and their beard oil and, their cigars, and like, we are men's men, and we're here to talk about the recovery of being a man from our feminized culture. And people want to run to that. Why? Because they've been at Matt Chandler's woke church singing Hillsong, I guess. So you have all these men, and their town is getting taken over by Y Project style churches. The worship is feminized. They're trying to do Pride Night at the ballpark, and you're like, I just want to, golly, I want to be a man. And they're, come listen to us. We're going to tell you how to be a man. It's a gimmick. Their gimmick is being a man's man. A man's man. That was literally a gimmick WWF used for William Regal once. The real man's man. You can look it up. So when I see Brian Sauve, whatever, and Eric Kahn, even before the Nazi shows up as their sponsor, when I see them, I see cosplay people. They're dressing up as Duck Dynasty Man's Man guys. Like, oh, I get it. And I'm not attracted to them because I'm not a disaffected 21-year-old insult. Okay, that's not me. Okay, I don't feel like, what am I going to run to? So they're playing a part. I hope that's apparent. And apparently that part is racist. And when you can start piecing this together. This is America. They could have put their church anywhere they wanted to. Why did they choose Utah? Because Utah is white. Talking about the white boys making that white noise. Take me where those honkies are a-tonkin'. White boys living like the real McCoys. I can't keep my cowboy boots from stomping. You know where that's Utah. I know that's country music, but Utah is just full of white people. Just full of them. And Ogden is, I looked it up, I think Ogden is 70% white and like 20 or 30% Hispanic, and then there's 2 black guys. You know, there's just not black people in Utah. There's such a small percentage of them. And one of the reasons for that historically is that Mormons were super racist. So Mormons settle Utah. Mormons are a very dominant social group in Utah. And when you think sociologically of Mormons, you just think of white blonde people. And they're all Boy Scouts. And they all play basketball at BYU. Okay, that's when you think of Utah is super white. So if you want to go to a place and say, we're going to be like white separatists or white nationalists, Utah is the place to go because of that history of racism. It was almost to 1980 before black people could hold the priesthood in the Mormon church. And by the way, the Mormon church priesthood is not like some guy who has to go to seminary and study for 10 years. They give it to 13-year-olds and 18-year-olds. You get the Melchizedek priesthood and the Aaronic priesthood. That's what all those guys who come and witness to you are elders and they're 19 years old. So that they just give that priesthood to everybody. So basically saying like you couldn't be a basic Mormon and be black until almost 1980. Because of the virulent racism throughout Mormon culture. But I would argue this. I would say racism against blacks is probably more prevalent and accepted in Utah than it is here in Georgia, where I'm from, which was a Confederate state that had slaves. Because we actually have black people here that we live with and get along with, unlike Utah. So I don't think it's any accident that Sauve and Kahn set up their operation in Utah. I think race has a lot to do with it. I think their name, think of the name of their church. They could have named it anything. They could have called it Provo Christian Church. But what did they call it? Refuge. They're communicating to people that our church and our podcast and our publishing group and our conferences are a refuge. A refuge for whom? The white man. It's the white Christian man. Well, how do you know that, Seth? Well, because the Nazi knew he could sell his books at their conference. Do you understand that Smithfield Pork doesn't buy a sponsor booth at the Hadith conference? If there's Muslims that put on a conference about, how to be Muslim in America and how to interpret the Hadith, and they have sponsors, Smithfield pork doesn't show up, all right? Coors beer doesn't show up because Islam, you can't have alcohol or pork. They're not sponsors. They're not stupid enough to think we're going to carry our stuff down here and sell it. That Nazi guy thought he could go sell his books there. He had a little pamphlet on his table that said, "Thank you for shopping pro-white." That's who Sauve and Con are. And I think people like this can almost get away with it because these are serious Reformed theological guys. Guys, this is the same model Jimmy Swaggart had. So, Jimmy Swaggart was defrocked by the AOG, the Assemblies of God. He kept his church, but he was defrocked because he was a whoremonger. And he got in trouble with prostitutes once, and then he got in trouble with prostitutes again, and the Assemblies of God said, no, we're not going to give you any ministry credentials. No, we're defrocking you. Well, did that stop Jimmy Swaggart? No, because this is America. So I want you to think about it. Jimmy Swaggart, you can Google this. He's dead now. He had his own publishing line. He published his own books, so he had a publishing arm of his quote-unquote ministry. He had a church that he preached at, so like a local church, but he had that part of it. He had a school, so he has an education arm, and he had music, because he could sing. So if you look at Refuge, it's almost just like Jimmy Swaggart in that you have this person who's not accountable to anybody. I don't even know if they have voting membership. I'll be shocked if they do. You have Duck Dynasty, black and white movie villain guys set up, we're the man's men, in the Refuge in White, Utah. And they're putting out music. They're holding conferences. They're publishing books. They're like, I think it's New Christendom Press or something. Whenever you have something that's Christendom and somebody puts new in front of it, it's probably wrong. Like, we've got 2,000 years of orthodoxy. If you're new, you're probably wrong. But these guys have a publishing arm and a school, and how do they fill it up? How do they get popular? By finding the disaffected people the same way the KKK does. The KKK historically has filled, I'm not talking about going back to 1800s, I'm talking about like 1970s. They fill their ranks by finding young men who say, listen, your school is dangerous now because they're busing people in. The government's out to get you. The white man is your friend. If somebody comes to me and says, Seth joined the KKK, the white man is your friend, I'd be like, I don't want to hang out with you. You guys are losers. I have a good job. I have 2 college degrees. I live in a big house. I'm a Christian. I go to church. I don't need you. I don't feel alone and isolated. What are you talking about? You work at Jiffy Lube when you got your arms are full of tattoos. I'm not going to go play tennis with you. You know what I mean? Sorry, not to insult anybody who works at Jiffy Lube. But I think that's where Derek Vineyard worked in American History X. So if you watch the movie American History X, the Nazi guy, how does he make himself popular? How does he find followers? He finds disaffected people. So that's what they do. We've got Refuge Church. We've got our own media arms. We've got our own school. You could come here and be a refuge. And, we're going to have a place for your white Christian nationalist family. Except we're Nazis. Of course, they don't say they're Nazis. Just their sponsors are Nazis. So what's interesting is they're being repudiated by Doug Wilson and James White. And see, Wilson and White are the people like Apologia and Moscow. They're competing for the same disaffected people for theonomy. And here's what Sauve and Con are doing. They're going further into socially unacceptable territory than Apologia or Moscow would. But mark and avoid them because they're gas station churches doing the same thing as Jimmy Swaggart. Speaking of Jimmy Swaggart, you can look this up too. Did you know Jimmy Swaggart got in trouble for funding a group in Africa that was a proxy of South Africa's apartheid government? I can't make this up. So you had South Africa that had apartheid, but you had Rhodesia, a different culture, a different country that had, I think Rhodesia had apartheid too, and they were an ally with South Africa. And there was some anti-communist nationalist group in Rhodesia that was funded by Jimmy Swaggart. And I thought, wow, what a coincidence. This sounds like something the Ogden guys would fund too. I think most of you listening to my program would have the same reaction as me, and you'd be going through life sort of half paying attention to these guys and think, I don't know about these guys. And then the Nazis there, and you're like, yep, I do know about these guys. Nothing to do with them. But here's what you're going to find. You're going to have men in your church and conservative people in your circles who are going to start retweeting these guys and sharing their books. And this is when you have to say, hey, stop. These are white nationalists. And you start thinking all these things like, okay, I'm white. I'm a Christian. I'm a nationalist in that's like my foreign policy. I want like America first. I'm not one of these people for unchecked immigration. Like I support ICE deporting people who are here illegally. I'm white. I'm a Christian. I'm a nationalist. But Seth, are you a white Christian nationalist? I'm like, well, no. I'm not one of these guys with a beard and cigar listening to Joel Webben podcast, blaming the Jews for everything. And do you understand, like, you can't be overtly anti-Semitic and racist and have a real job? Like, if I got on the Christian commute and just started spewing racially insensitive and anti-Semitic comments, eventually a secular employer, and I've always been secularly employed, I think a secular employer would find a way to get rid of me. Okay? But when you're a pastor, especially an unaccountable one, who just funds a gas station church, you can just say whatever you want as long as you have enough people to donate money to you. I think that's how that works with Webben. I think it's how it works with Doug Wilson. I think it's how it works with Jeff Durbin. And I think it's how it works with Sauve or Sauve. And I always think it's interesting if somebody is Presbyterian in everything except their church government. I gave the example of Zach Garris last week, who got his hand slapped. Not hand slapped, I guess he got convicted at a trial and he could be defrocked or have his ministry credentials taken away by the PCA because they didn't like something he said. And they cleared him of saying something racist, but they didn't clear him of being mean to a black guy. And do you know who was speaking at that conference? Zach Garris. And he came out and said, like, it's unfortunate that vendor was there, otherwise it was good. When you're in an organization, you just can't act like that or they'll get rid of you. And that's why you'll always find these guys like Webben and Sauve, they'll just go out and start something on their own. There's no one to stop them. This is a freak. You can start a Nazi church, and if you wanted to start the New Testament Nazi church, and like we're totally Christian and we believe the Westminster Confession, but we're also pro-Nazi. This is America. You can do that. And you'll be successful in as much as you can get people to come and support you. So that's the trend going on out west. Now, how do I bring this all back home? You can see them coming. When their church is about something other than just being the people of God, when it's about retaking our nationalist heritage, or we're being men's men. We've got our men's podcast and our conferences for being on men. Not having a men's ministry per se, but when they have a shtick, when they're dressed up, when they have a costume on, when they have a gimmick, that's how you can tell. So I think everybody should have been able to tell who Khan and Sauve were. Like when some guy walks up to me and like, "Hi, I'm Seth." "Oh, hi, I'm Brian." "Well, what do you do, Seth?" "Well, I'm an accountant. I work over here at the factory." "What do you do, Brian?" "I'm a pastor." "Oh, okay. Where'd you go to seminary?" "Well, I went to Calvary Chapel Bible College." "Oh, which Calvary Chapel are you at?" "Oh, I'm not at a Calvary Chapel. I founded my own church in Utah. I named it Refuge, and I have my own music and my own publishing arm and my own school and my own conferences. And look at my beard and my black and white movie villain mustache." I'm like, "Oh, you're a complete phony. And you're trying to get disaffected people to join your little movement. You may never be a millionaire, but you can make a living with about 100 of them. Never mind that it brings reproach to Christ and you have basically an argument over Twitter ministry. Never mind that your church is totally Presbyterian except for the presbytery. Do you understand that if these guys tried to join a Presbyterian organization, they couldn't have credentials? Like Khan couldn't. Like it's in the PCA, you like know Greek and Hebrew and like have all this grasp of the biblical languages and theology to get credentials. These guys would not get credentials in the PCA. They wouldn't. And even if they got them, they'd lose them for hanging around with Nazis. So they just found their own thing. Be discerning. Warn your people about the Sauves and Khans of the world. And don't let the young men of your church get so disaffected that they're susceptible to buying in to the Ogden Refuge. Thanks for listening to the Christian Commute. Lord willing, I'll be back with you again Tuesday. As always, God bless. And as always, remember, Christianity is not about getting saved. It's about being saved.